So we're in the beginning of the seventh parak, starting a new parak, and that's I think the Samach Vav, is that? Yeah, Samach Vav, new parak. So really, the next couple of parakim don't have to do with the Yibum. It's not. It's a question how it comes in all these sugyas about Truma and Kohen. We're not sure how it comes in over here. So. Okay, so a little akdama to the subject we're going to talk about now is about, of course, the Kohen eats Truma, and Yisrael is not allowed to eat Truma. Has to be a Kohen, not a Zar, not a non-Kohen. And a Kohen, the pasuk says the Kohen, good morning, owns property, also the property can eat also, and that's Eved. If he owns an Eved, so the Avadim of the Kohen, the Avdei Kohen, the slave of a Kohen is also allowed to eat Truma. Just we have spoken about many. What is that? He's allowed to. Yeah. The children, of course, and they're also Kohen, and even the daughter, but also the slaves. That's called Kinyan Kaspo. That things that the Kohen owns also is allowed to eat Truma. And
what's the word for Kaspo?
Kinyan Kaspo.
Kinyan.
Kohen. Kiyeknek, Nefesh, Kinyan Kaspo. This is the introduction. That's all in the beginning. And the pasuk talks about that a Bas Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen, who marries Yisrael, is not allowed to eat Truma. Once she marries the Yisrael, she's not allowed to eat Truma. If she gets widowed or divorced, so then she could go back to her father's status, and she could eat Truma again. Unless she has a child from the Yisrael, then she cannot. And she's already in the husband's family, even after he dies, then she could not be able to eat Truma. And then there's something the person does not spell out, but the Bas Yisrael that marries a Kohen, the wife of a Kohen, could the wife of a Kohen eat Truma?
Who marries the wife?
Who marries a Kohen?
Marries a Kohen.
The wife of a Kohen. So we say for sure. Yeah. But why is it for sure? It doesn't say so. So she's not a Kohen. She's not the children of a Kohen are Kohanim. But to the wife of a Kohen eat Truma? So
well, we said the household.
The household means it's only the children. It doesn't say household. It doesn't say household.
What is Kinyan?
Kinyan Kaspo means what he owns. What he acquires. So the chiddush is that a wife is also called Kinyan Kaspo. I don't think that it means that he owns her. It doesn't mean like he owns property. I don't think that means he owns her. He doesn't. But it means that since it's also called that he acquires her with kesef, the acquisition. She's acquired. That's enough. And therefore, the wife of a Kohen also is allowed to eat Truma as long as she's married to him. If she gets widowed or divorced, she also goes back to her previous status, and she cannot eat Truma. If she has a son, then also she could eat Truma. Again, that's all just introduction to the subject. So, if we may, learn the second half of the Mishnah first. The second half of the Mishnah starts, we're on Samach Vav, and the second half of the Mishnah, if we can start from Bas Yisrael, Shenisis L'Kohen, it's a little bit. This is the first one on the line is Yochel B'Truma on the chart here on the screen. So it shows a big period. The first one on the line is Yochel B'Truma, then it's Bas Yisrael. And we'll learn the second half of the Mishnah, then we'll learn the beginning of the Mishnah, because the second half is simpler, and the beginning half is the more complicated case, the more involved case. So one more piece of information we need about the subject is that when a wife brings in property into the marriage, there are two ways that she can bring it in. One is called Diksei Muluk, one is called Diksei Tzon Barzel. I don't know the English terms for that, or if there are English terms, but the point is that there are two ways that a wife's property gets into the husband's house. Diksei Muluk means that it belongs to her. It remains hers. The husband is the one who deals with it as long as they're married, which means that the profits would go to him. But the Karen, the principal, still belongs to her. Of course, he has to support her and all those things. They have obligations of a husband to a wife. But he does get the privilege of the profits of the property, but the property still belongs to her. The other way to do it is, and if eventually he would divorce her or he dies, so then she gets back her property. It's her property the whole time. Just he was eating the profits while they were married, but the property belonged to her the whole time. And when it comes to an end, either because of divorce or death, so then she gets back her property, whatever it's worth. If it got worth more, if it got worth less, it's her property. There's another way to bring in property, and that is Tzon Barzel. Tzon Barzel literally means iron sheep. Iron sheep is an expression that means that it stays the same. It's a kind of a sheep that doesn't change. It doesn't die, it doesn't get better, it doesn't grow, it stays the same. And then they evaluate how much property should go in. Whatever they come to the valuation, they bring in a shamai, how much it's worth. and then the husband obligates himself to be responsible for that amount of money, and it stays the same. And that means that if the end of the marriage, either by death or divorce, she gets back the same amount of money, regardless if the property went up or down. Next thing we'll look, it belonged to her the whole time. And if it goes up or down, so that's her loss or gain. But if it's Son Barzel, so he obligates himself to pay the value that she brought in, and she gets back that value. Just to make a long story short, the end of the Gemara is going to seem to come out that by Son Barzel, really, she's selling it to him. She's really selling it to him, and he owes her the money when the marriage is over. Let's say Son Barzel, and it's really going to become his. When she brings in property and he evaluates how much it's worth, and he's going to be responsible to give that amount of money at the end of the marriage, either by death or divorce. So then he's paying for it. More or less, that's what the Gemara is going to say.
Well, even if it went down, he has to pay.
Right.
For what,
Yeah, that for sure.
As if he bought it.
Right, and it's going to right. And the Gemara is going to talk about that is it actually his, and the Gemara is going to come out that really it is his. That it's really his, and it's
she brings in dowry.
right. And then the question is, what is the status? What is dowry? What is it?
She gives to him.
So
Right, the marriage
right.
contract.
So it's not. It doesn't end over there. It isn't just that she gives him a present. That's not what it is. It's that she still has something about it. It means if the marriage ends, either because of death or divorce, so she gets back. So there are two ways to bring. She has a choice when she brings it in. How does she bring it in? It's next thing look. That's on Barzel. Usually she says it's mine. The thing remains mine the whole time, even during the marriage it belongs to her. And if the price goes up, the value goes up or down, so it's hers, her loss or gain. During the marriage, as long as they're married, so the husband eats the profits, but the principal belongs to her the whole time. The other way to bring it in is that she's sort of selling it to him. He does make himself responsible to pay for the value that you brought in. As long as they're married, there's no issue because they're married. But if the marriage comes to an end, so then he has to pay the amount that was evaluated at the beginning of the marriage, and he has to pay her that amount. No matter if it went up or down, that's the amount that they evaluated, which comes out that it's more or less that she gave it to him, she sold it to him, and he obligated, but he doesn't have to pay until the marriage is over. Those are the two ways.
Right, now let's say if there's a fire or a flood and the things get ruined.
So in the first case, right. So in the first case, that is hers. So hers got ruined,
Right.
and if it's his, then it's his got ruined, and he still has to pay. He still has to pay the amount that he obligated himself for. That's an introduction. That's called Nifsei Malug. That's called Tzon Barzel. The word Malug literally they say means, I'm not sure, but I say when you have a absorbed, I don't think they say that it means like boiling in a way, in a sense that when you have a head of an animal, I don't know if you do this nowadays, you have a head of an animal and you want to remove the hairs. So you put into boiling water and the hairs come off. So that means that he has a right to get the profits. That's the same look that he eats off the profits, but the thing still stays. I think that's the reason why it's called that.
What does it mean? You boil off the hairs and he gets the
You boil up the head and the hairs come off. That's right. That's not right. The hairs means a profit. Understand? No. Usually that's just the way to get the hairs off. But the point is that, and muscle for something that this principle stays the same, and just the way of shaving off the hairs. Maybe that's not the pshat, but more or less that's the idea. So those are the same. We're looking next to some Barzel. So the Gemara. So that's an introduction in order to understand what's happening now. And now we start. So we're starting the middle of the Mishnah. We'll come back to the beginning soon. The first case is that a Bas Yisrael, Shenisas the Kohen. A woman who's not a Kohenes, her father's not a Kohen, she's a regular Bas Yisrael. She married a Kohen. She's not a Truma. How about the slaves? How about her slaves? She brought in slaves also. She brought in slaves into the marriage. She brought in slaves into the marriage. So he could eat, the husband could eat truma, and the wife could eat truma. So it doesn't make a difference who the avadim are. The avadim could have been brought in as nifsei malug, which means that it's her slaves. It could have been brought in as nifsei son brazil, means that it's his slaves. In this first case, the simple case that both of them can eat truma. The husband eats truma, the wife eats truma. So we don't care whose slaves they are. If it's the slaves of the husband, they could eat truma, and the slaves of the wife could eat truma. That's the first simple case. Now that she's married, she's also becomes an Eishes Kohen. Eishes Kohen is allowed to eat truma, and it says not only she can eat truma, her slaves also can eat truma. We'll see the Gemara about that. That's called kinyan shekarna kinyan. That's called that the acquisition of the Kohen who's allowed to eat truma. If they acquire something, that's the acquisition of the acquisition, like a double step. Also has a right to eat truma. So if the woman eats truma because she married a Kohen, her slaves are also allowed to eat truma. And the Cohen slaves surely are allowed to eat truma. So that's the first. That's
In a
the,
case like this, just so if they're avdei malug,
yes.
it would mean if there are children, they'll belong to the husband.
Okay, as far as the prophets are saying,
And if
that's
it was,
considered the
if it was
prophets.
an avdei son, those children belong to her.
I guess so. Good. I don't know all the details, but it sounds good. As
Well,
far
why
as the
are they
principle,
saying bein this and bein that?
it's saying the way it says, "Bein avdei muluk, bein avdei tzon baraza." We're not talking about children, we're talking about truma. We don't know
I'm
today
just
truma.
asking, since we were talking about what the difference between.
Right,
them
right. So I
is.
understand. Makes
Is there
sense
a
what you're saying, but I'm saying I don't know. So I'm just saying it sounds good. But how did it?
Well, what would be the heroes of an epic?
Good. I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't like saying yes, if I don't for sure know for sure, but it sounds very good. It sounds good. So here it says that in the case where a Jewish woman, Jewish meaning Israel, everyone's Jewish here, but the point is that not a Kohen, Israelis, that married a Kohen, she brought in slaves into the marriage. The slaves could eat truma, both if they're her slaves, or if they're his slaves, because next it's on Barzel. Both of them could eat truma because the woman could eat truma and the husband could eat truma. So her slaves could eat truma, his slaves could eat truma. Simple, good.
Nick's is that
It belongs.
bought it from her.
No, it belongs to her, and it belongs to her. It's hers. He has the right to
He
eat
works.
profits. That's the profits he can get. That's the side point. But means that Ev is going to work. You want to know profit of David?
Well,
David
profit
works.
would be he's working.
The Evid
That
works.
profit is
So
his.
yeah, he works with the Evid, but the Evid belongs to her. That would be the simple case. You want to know about the children? Probably
Oh, I
right.
see.
But we're not talking about that. Now we're talking about if they could eat truma. So we say that both her avodim and both his avodim, both of them can eat truma.
Why? Because she's a bas Kohen.
No, look at the case. Look at the case. Ashes Cohen, right? You
Ashes
see-
Kohen has the same dinim in terms of food as.
Since she's allowed to eat truma, she also her slaves could eat truma, and he could eat truma. His slaves could eat truma. That's simple. The next case is also going to be simple. Bas Cohen Shnisisli Israel.
Right, she's out now. She's not going to be able to eat.
Right, Right, he cannot eat truma.
Mhm.
I didn't, so I didn't underline all this. Okay, this case is that he cannot eat truma and she cannot eat truma. Once the Bas Cohen married Israel, she's not allowed to eat truma either. So it doesn't make a difference who her slaves are. Both his because his slaves cannot eat truma and her slaves cannot eat truma because he cannot eat truma and she cannot eat truma. All that case is simple.
Okay, just a side point. The Evid Barzel. The Evid Barzel belongs to the wife, not to the man.
Belongs to the man. So Braz belongs to the man. The muluk belongs to her, and he just eats off the payros. And so Brazel, iron sheep, means that it stays the same. That means that really it's his. He also has to own it.
It's his.
Maybe the terminology we'll get as we talk. We'll talk more. But so far, what do you want to say about it? The case. You want to say something about it?
Yeah, profits. Is there a difference in the profits?
Between one and one.
Barzel and Maluk
Yes, that's what we said. That
with an Evid.
no difference in the profits because he always gets the profits. But by the Ton Barzel, he's getting it because it's his. The principle is his even. So surely the profits are his. Then says the muluk means that the principle is hers and he just gets the profits. So there's no difference as far as the profits go because in both cases he gets the profits. But the difference is the principle. So who does the principle
So
belong
then
to?
it's not. So the nafkamina would be with the children.
I'm not sure. I'd rather not. I don't know why you're stressing it because not the subject at all. What's
Okay,
considered
just to
parents?
understand the difference between Maluk and Barzel.
So who's the principle belong to?
Okay, Maluk, the principal belongs to her.
Right.
Barzel, it says if she's selling it to him,
So it's his.
Okay.
You want to know, children are called profits. Talk about profits. Profits means what the Evid works, the simple profits, right? But when I even talk about that, we just want to know if they could eat truma. So that's the Mishnah's case, and the end of the Mishnah is simple: that if both of them, the husband and the wife, both of them can eat truma, so both of their slaves can eat truma. If both of them cannot eat truma, so both of their slaves cannot eat truma. Now the Mishnah in the beginning has a more involved case. It's going to be a case where the husband could eat truma, and the wife cannot eat truma.
The husband can eat truma,
Because he's a Kohen,
but the wife.
and the wife cannot eat truma because she became a halala. And the case is going to be by an illegal marriage over here. So the law is that the woman becomes nischalel with the fact that they had this Bia, which was Asa, Isuri Kuna, so she becomes Pasa. He doesn't become Pasa.
Why doesn't he become?
He doesn't become Pasa. The children become Pasa. But the children are born are going to be Halalim. They're going to be non-Kohanim. But the wife becomes Pasa and the children, but not the man himself. The Daver doesn't become Pasa.
That same Kohen go and marry a kosher wife.
Yeah, now we can go on. Now he should divorce her and he should go on to a kosher marriage. But he doesn't become Pasa. He becomes,
Maybe it was an accident.
it doesn't make a difference.
I thought once a person.
She becomes
Yeah, I
Pasa
know,
even if,
just in terms of,
how did it happen?
yeah, how did that?
But even if it's an accident, she becomes Pasa and he does not. And even if it's,
Yeah.
and even if it's on purpose, amazing, she becomes Pasa, he does not. Why? I don't know.
And
He
that's gonna
doesn't.
be the title of our pair.
On one, that's gonna be the opening statement, opening case. In the case where the, on one of the Kohen Gadol. But it doesn't say yet what it is, what about it? But it's gonna come out that his slaves are allowed to eat truma because they're his slaves. And her slaves cannot eat truma because she cannot eat truma. So, and I thought it was nice, the first, they ended the Mishnah first. Here's the case, there was a marriage that's also for the Kohen. Either he's a Kohen Gadol, cannot even marry an Almana. If he's a regular Kohen Hedyot, they couldn't marry an Almana, can't marry Grusha, but they did it. It was a marriage of Avera, which means that she becomes a Halala, she becomes Pasal. And she brought in two kinds of Avadim, for instance, or either one, whatever. So the halach is Avdei Muluk lo yochlu b'truma. Avdei tzon brazil yochlu. So the ones that belong to her cannot eat truma because they're her avadim and she cannot eat truma. But his avadim could eat truma. That's what it says. That Avdei Muluk is hers, even though he eats the profits. But who does the slave belong to? It belongs to her. It's her property. Her property cannot eat truma because she cannot eat truma, and his avadim could eat truma because he's allowed to eat truma. Is that good? Then the rest of the Mishnah in between has now parentheses over here to explain what's malug and what's zon braza, which we spoke about. That was opening statement. Eluvein avdim malug in mesu mesula the mosiru sirula. A case that the ramifications of something being avdim malug means that if the avadim died, it's her loss. This is your case that the property got destroyed. It's her loss. It's hers. So if they die, it's her loss. If they became more worthy, they became more valuable. So then it's her gain because she owns the principal. He's responsible to feed them, to feed these avadim. But they're not allowed truma because the fact he has to feed them is not a reason he doesn't own it. He has a responsibility to feed them. He gets the profits, he feeds them, but they belong to her. So since they belong to her, they cannot eat truma.
What is Hutevno?
Osiru, extra, more. They became more. They became worth more.
It became worth more.
What does that find, Devin?
She's a halala.
She's a halala, and therefore they cannot eat truma, right? She can, right? Since she cannot eat truma, so she can't eat, so she can't feed. What is the case of Avdei Tzon Bazel? It mesu lo. The mosiru lo. If they died, it's his loss. If Mizislo is going to have to pay the amount that he obligated himself because that's Tzon Bazel, that's what he means. And if they became more valuable, so it's his gains. Since he has responsibility, the responsibility means this, that if it goes up or down, it's his loss or gain. That's the reason why he could eat truma, because it's his. And that's the Mishnah. Everything's good?
Why do we go to the beginning first? Because Almana.
Because why did I read the second half first? Because it's simpler. That's first the basics. That if both of them, I could have started really from Ve'eluhen Avdim Muluk. I could have first said what does it mean Avdim Muluk, what does it mean Tzon Bazel, which we did explain orally. And then the Mishnah talks about simple cases. This end of the Mishnah is that both of them could eat truma, both the wife and their husband.
It's a different question. Why did the Mishnah start with that?
We wouldn't know the easy cases just from the hard cases.
We could figure it out.
So why did it mention?
Okay, all good questions. But the idea seems to be good, that there are cases where the woman is the owner of the slaves. There are cases where the husband is the owner of the slaves. And eating eating truma depends who's their owner. If the owner is somebody that could eat truma, so then they have the right to eat truma also. If their owner is somebody who cannot eat truma, they cannot eat truma. Good. Now the Gemara has one question on the whole idea that when the wife's slaves eat truma, why are they eating truma? What's their right to eat truma? She's not a Kohen.
Thank you, everyone.
She's not a Kohen. The Abbas Yisrael, they married a Kohen. Why could her slaves eat truma?
Because by association, because she's someone who is Ochlei
All
Truma.
right.
She's someone who,
She is Ochlei Truma.
right? So who says Ochlei Truma?
Ishtokagufa. That means
Right,
that
so
she
that-
does what her husband does.
So it's not really the reason, because I hear the kasha. I don't know the answer. Why is that not an priest that a wife should eat truma? But when we ask, how come a wife eats truma? It's only because she's called kinyan kaspa. You said it before. Before you said a different reason. Now you're saying a new reason. I don't know why that's not a good enough reason. But it's not because they gufa. We don't say because the wife is like her husband. The only reason that a wife could eat truma is only because she was acquired from
By the money.
she was acquired by the Kohen. The same way, that's not nice to say. I don't mean to say it. The same way when a slave, he buys a slave, the slave could eat truma because the Kohen acquired him. That's really his property. So to a wife. Not that a wife is the property. It's not the right to say it, but it means the same way that there was acquisition. The husband acquires the wife. He's the one who gives the ring, right? Not that she gives the ring to him.
Yeah.
So he acquires the wife. So the acquisition allows her to eat truma. Now the question is, why could her slaves eat truma? She's not a Kohen. She was acquired by a Kohen. That's why she eats truma. So why could her slaves eat truma? So there's going to be a chiddush that the acquisition of an acquisition also could eat truma. Just like the Kohen's acquisition could eat, so the acquisition that acquired something, so also could eat. It's the kinyan. It's a chiddush. I don't know if we know about it. So
She's
the Muslim say a
status when she becomes dresser. When she's eating truma,
yes.
she's now a different stage.
So then what? How about
like a Kohen.
no? So the same way, they all look the same as an eved. When an eved eats truma, you're right. It's eved, but the status is because is the acquisition of the Kohen. And the same way, just to make it really extreme, the Gemara is going to say, if the Eved buys Avadim, if it's possible, how do you get a technicality that the Eved should buy an Eved? The slave bought a slave. Also, that's the same subject. The same way that a woman buys a slave, a wife buys a slave, and the slave could eat truma because it's acquisition of an acquisition. So too, if the slave would buy a slave, however that's possible that he should have money, whatever the case is, if the slave would buy a slave, also that slave eats truma because it's the kinyan of a kinyan. It's the acquisition of an acquisition.
I have difficulty with that because the husband and the wife are Baalim.
No,
He's a Baal and she's a Baala.
no, ain't.
She's not a Baala.
That's not an asugya. There's no such thing that she's about. She is the
Whereas
acquisition.
the slave is always
She's the
subservient to
Here
the
we're
will
talking-
of the master.
As far as truma goes, the reason why your wife eats truma, I hear the question. I don't know the answer, but we have to take this thing of Ishta Kagufa and put it away. Like that's not the subject there. That's not the reason why she eats truma. She's truma because he's the acquisition of a Kohen. When you ask the woman, how are you eating truma? We asked the woman, how could you eat truma? You're not a Koheness. You're not a daughter of a Kohen. She says, because I'm the acquisition of my husband. That's why she eats.
And animals would be the same thing.
Animals of a Kohen are also allowed to eat truma.
Of the wife,
Yes.
her animals
Yes.
would eat
The same way his
truma,
animals
just
do,
like-
right? Because it's
like the
acquisition of
slaves.
an acquisition. Yeah, that's the Gemara. Now so we'll see right away. That's what I was going to say. And the Gemara's kasha is going to be just to throw out the kasha right away. The way the Gemara does. What's the difference if she can't eat truma?
If she can.
Even if she cannot eat truma, we said in the Mishnah that if she cannot eat truma, her slaves cannot eat truma. Why not? The acquisition of the acquisition. If the only reason why her slaves eat truma is because they're the acquisition of the acquisition, so what's the difference if this first acquisition cannot eat truma? What does she have to be able to eat truma for? You ask this slave of the wife, your owner's owner is a Kohen. Okay, so eat truma. That's the
Even if she's not.
even if she's
a
not,
Yisra.
she has a problem when she became a halala. She can't eat
I said we're
truma.
gonna it's a kasha on the answer.
It's a kasha on the Mishnah.
On our
On our Mishnah, the Mishnah says
She
that
broke the chain. She broke the chain.
she
She broke the chain back to the Kohen.
No, but she's related to the Kohen. Still, not related.
Related,
She's
yes,
owned.
but
She's
not-
owned by the Kohen.
Yeah.
We'll use the word own, even though it's a gross word to use for marriage. But as far as we're talking about truma, it's because her husband acquired her. So is she still acquired by the husband? Yes. And she has an acquisition? Yes. So the slave should be able to eat truma even though she cannot. That's going to be the Gemara's kasha. The Mishnah says that
because of
her
an
slaves,
acquisition. You mean in terms of the principle?
right.
Acquisition
If
of
the whole reason why her
acquisition,
slaves could eat is because they're the acquisition of an acquisition,
then
can
it
you?
doesn't matter what that acquisition
L'chora,
is.
that's the kasha. Abavdi melud lo yochel b'truma. Her slaves cannot eat truma. Amai levik kinyan or shekane kinyan. It's like his acquisition which acquired kinyan or shel kinyan, and they should be able to eat truma even if the wife cannot eat truma. The Tanya, benayin l'kohen shenasa isha v'kana avadim sheyochel b'truma. How do you know that a kohen who married a wife or a kohen that acquired avadim, how do you know they can eat truma? This is the verse where it says that the wife of a kohen can eat truma, the slave of a kohen can eat truma. Where does it come from? Shenemar v'kohen ki yikna nefesh kinyan kasbo hu yochel bo. A kohen who acquires a person with his money, kinyan kasbo, he could eat it. And the Gemara says that the Rice Lishman is saying that's both a slave. If the Kohen buys a slave, it's called Kinyan Kaspo. It says, and also if he marries a wife, that's called Kinyan Kaspo. That's the source that you know that a Kohen's wife or a Kohen's slave can eat truma. Now it goes further. And now this wife or slave bought slaves. Either this wife bought slaves or the slave bought slaves. They're also allowed to eat truma. That's the kasha. So this is the end of the brisa. Here's the end of the brisa. The last one on the line is the end of the brisa, and it says the reason why a slave's slave or a wife's slave eats is because it's a kinyan of a kinyan.
I'm sorry, where's the end?
Till the end of the line. That's all the brisa from the Tanya, right? From 9. All this. Okay, I can't do that. Okay, so that's the kasha. If the reason why a wife's slaves eat truma is because they're the acquisition of an acquisition, so it shouldn't make a difference if she can't eat truma. Even if she can't, they're not eating. In other words, the kasha is they're not eating because of her. They're eating because of her husband, and her husband's allowed to eat truma. So even though she technically cannot eat truma, that doesn't affect the principle. If it will be she who is giving her, she's the one who gives them the right to eat. So then she cannot eat. So they cannot eat.
There's a big problem here. She shouldn't be married to him.
That's true.
No, but in that case, it's not. It's a what's the word? It's a sour relationship. It should be out. It should be culminated. At this point, that marriage should be culminated.
That's true.
Therefore, it's not a normal halachic flow here. There's not something wrong.
But
here.
Kedushin is still. He's still.
It's in place because they haven't got to doing what they're supposed to do.
I think I'm not sure, but I think that the neshama of your like the previous of your question is because you're still going Ishtok Gufo, and this is not a good Ishtok Gufo. You don't like that. But if the point is because
is out of
no, it's not. The Kedushin is Tofes. They did an Avera. There's some kind of Avera that's not Tofes even. Chayve Krisos. There's no Kedushin. He gave her a ring, nothing happened. But by Chayve Lavin, it does take effect. It takes effect. They're married. She needs a gift.
It takes effect, but it's never.
It's not right. But it's halachically binding.
Unsound. It's totally unsound.
It's wrong. It's wrong to do. But
exactly.
Yes, but it still takes effect.
How can you use a healthy principle
because it still takes effect. Sometimes it's
okay. So I would like to say.
But you agree that you agree that kedushin is tofes. Kedushin is tofes. Kedushin takes effect.
Yeah, we said that, but
so
we always know that it's not the way it's
they're supposed to get. We tell them you have to get a gift.
Yeah.
We tell them you're not allowed to stay married. They're doing an avera. But the kedushin is kedushin. By some chavi krisos doesn't take effect, and we say leave. You're not married. We tell if someone would give a ring to his sister, so we say it's garnished. You didn't do anything. You're not married. You don't need to get. It's nothing. But just separate. But if they chayve lavin that he gave her a ring, so they need a get. We'll force them to give a get, but they're married. So this marriage makes kinyan kaspo, and she should be able to eat truma. She can't eat truma technically because she's a halala, but if it would be okay, that's a question. I said something wrong just now that Erison doesn't make her a halala yet. But just to go further, so the question is that if the reason why the slaves are eating truma because the slaves are somebody who belongs to the Kohen, so she belongs to the Kohen. And what's the difference if she can eat truma or not? That's the Gemara's kasha. So for this kasha, we have 3 terutzim. I just highlighted it here. We have 3 terutzim over here. The first one starts on the Kala Ochel. That's going to be the first teretz. Then we're going to have Rava, then Ravashi. 3 terutzim to this kasha. The first teretz is that even though it goes through, the point is that the husband is the one who's really the source to be able to eat truma, but somehow it goes through the wife. Means the acquisition has the power to give its acquisition to eat truma, but if there was a short circuit over there because the acquisition itself cannot eat truma because she became a halala, so then she doesn't have the power to give her slaves. The kasha was that it goes straight. It's the acquisition. We skipped a step. We don't care who's in between. You're an acquisition of the acquisition. That's all. So now we're going to say only an acquisition that has the power to eat truma can make its acquisition eat truma. The Gemara starts off, if you could eat, you could feed. If you can't eat, you can't feed. Feeding here means to give the discuss to somebody else to eat truma. So somebody who could eat truma himself has the power to give somebody else to eat truma. But someone who doesn't have the power to eat truma themselves does not have the power to give somebody else to eat truma. The Gemara says, don't take the Gemara's going to edit it a little bit. It's not going to be exactly true. The first one is kasha. Will be about a person who's an orel. He's uncircumcised. The Kohen is uncircumcised, who has a Vadim, he's not allowed to eat Truma. The Kohen can't eat Truma because an Orel is not allowed to eat Truma. We're going to get to that later. An Orel is not allowed to eat Truma. And also a Tameh Kohen. Are you going to say that a Tameh Kohen is a Vadim cannot eat? A Kohen has a Vadim, and he became Tameh. Are you going to say since he can't eat, so his Avadim cannot eat? That's not true. So your principle is not true. Someone cannot eat, he still could feed. That's the kasha.
The initiation of the opinion of the Baal to the slaves, he was the valid Baal, and he's considered Cheskes.
Yes. Who's
the Kohen who buys these slaves?
The Kohen became Tameh.
You can't tell me that doesn't mean that you go on this. It's temporary tummy. It's not becoming.
And if it's a permanent, and if it's a permanent Orel, permanent Tameh, also the same thing. That he is not allowed to eat Truma technically. That's the Gemara's answer. But he's not allowed to eat Truma. Still, he has the right to give his Avadim to eat Truma. So your cloud is not true. You said a cloud that only if you could eat could you feed. I'm showing you it's not true. You could have somebody, a Kohen, who's not allowed to eat because he's an Orel or a Tameh, and he still could feed his Avadim. The Gemara, maybe you're saying the Gemara's answer. The Gemara is very poetic. They have a mouthache. They have a problem. They have a toothache. They can't eat. They have a sore throat. They can't eat.
Like a toothache.
Pumayu is their mouth. Their mouth is paining them. That means that's a technical. That's why the Gemara is saying that technically they have a muzzle over their mouth. They can't eat. That doesn't mean that they're not roy to eat. They still are. He's still a person who could eat. Technically, he's a Orel, he's a Tameh, but he really is a Kohen that has the power to eat. Really, just technically he can't eat. So that doesn't stop from. What? Go ahead.
I mean, I thought that's what I. Okay. In other words, it's something that's
It's a technicality.
technical.
And they can accept Truma, right?
They can accept Truma. They
And
can give it
obviously
to
they're
their,
benefiting from it.
and they can give it to their slaves
sell it
and
to
so,
the
yeah,
Kohen.
yeah.
They can't
They
touch
just can't.
They
eat
can't
it.
touch
eat
it.
it.
They can't even touch it.
No, that's it's
You
tummy.
shouldn't make a tummy.
That's
Okay,
if they're
that's not-
oral,
that
it doesn't
doesn't, that doesn't affect anything, that he can't touch it.
no, I'm saying that even if he accepts it, he's got to say.
Okay, yeah, make
put
sure
it down.
doesn't make a
But not if
tummy,
he's
sure,
oral.
yeah, okay. But the point, one,
If he's an oral, he can touch it. Or we don't.
so that's the Gemara's answer, that this Yisod is still true, you only can give to feed if you can eat yourself here, that she became a halal, she doesn't have the power, she can't give over the truma. The Gemara says it's also not true. How about it seems to say, how about if he's a mamzer? Is a mamzer able to give to eat truma? So it's interesting case. Rashi has the words alone would mean if a coin is a mamzer. Do you have a coin mamzer? Is it
This would
possible?
be like the first case that'd be the child, right? As a mamzer, or that's a halal. It's a different thing.
A halal is
The,
a surah kahuna. Halal is the union of
The
son.
Kohen Gadol married a Gurush.
So the son is a halal.
It's not a mamzer.
It's not a mamzer. A mamzer means from chavi krisis. That the union of chavi krisis, the child born of a illicit relationship of chavi krisis. So the question is, it seems to say that a mamzer is a kohen. Is it possible to have a kohen as a mamzer? Is it possible to have a kohen as a mamzer? Why? Because the kohen married, had relations with a sister, chavi krisis, whatever it might be, and the child born. Is he a kohen? His father's a kohen. But it's a mamzer also. So that's the question. He's not a challah, it's only from Yisur Kuna. Yisur Kuna. So this is what?
Sister is a Suika.
It's nice to no, it's for everybody. Yisur Kuna means it's only limited, like Grusha, Halal, or Zona, that makes a challah. But Yisur for everybody doesn't make a challah. Only Yisur Kuna makes a challah. The words alone would sound like that you could have a mamzer as a kohen, which is very interesting. It means he doesn't lose his kohenship. I saw brought down Machlokas was showing about this.
You can't marry a Jew.
He's a mamzer,
You can't marry
right? But does he still have the status of a kohen,
marry
or does he lose the status of a kohen? Because is it possible to be at the simultaneously both a kohen and a mamzer? So it seems that Machlokas was showing it. Some say not. This Gemara, Rashi doesn't explain there's a kohen mamzer. Rashi talks about a little complicated case that we need a little bit more information to go into. So if it's possible, we'll leave it for now. But the Gemara is asking that it's possible for a mamzer that he has the right to give somebody truma, to feed somebody truma. In other words, his power will empower somebody to eat truma, but he himself is not allowed to eat truma. Because it'll take time to go through all that, so let's leave it along this one line. But on Ravina, the Gemara edits the klal that we said before, what it said before, a little to revise it a little bit. Kinyan ochel kama. When he says ochel, this word ochel, kala ochel, he means kinyan ochel, not the word ochel. Kinyan ochel. A kinyan, like he says now, kinyan ochel machel, she'ena ochel ena machel. The person himself, who's the source of giving the truma, the Kohen himself, that even if he cannot eat, he still has the power to empower somebody to eat. But if the only reason why he's able to give truma is because he's the acquisition of a Kohen, then you have this condition that he also has to be able to eat also. So this, and the Gemara, but the main point of the Gemara is to say that the wife who's giving her slaves to eat, which is called the acquisition of the acquisition, it's not enough that the husband has the power to eat truma, and therefore he's going to give his wife slaves. It has to go through the wife. And since the wife does not have the power to eat truma, so then her slaves cannot eat truma. Again, there is such a din that acquisition eats, and there also is a din acquisition eats. The slaves of a slave, the slaves of a wife, they also could eat. But there's a condition that acquisition number one, has to be able to eat also. And if they cannot, so then they're not able to give it over to the next acquisition. So we taught in the Kasha that you don't need, it doesn't make a difference what the wife is, as long as the husband, who's the source of this power to eat truma, is able to eat truma. So his acquisition could eat truma. It says no, it has to be that the acquisition also should be able to eat truma.
Who says this?
This was the first teretz, and Ravina explained it.
So when it says kinyan, it should say kinyan she'eno ochel also, right?
Right, kinyan ochel kama, kinyan ochel machel, kinyan she'en. Put the word kinyan here if you want.
Yeah.
Kinyan she'eno ochel eno machel, and that's the reason why she cannot give to eat truma. If she's puzzled to eat truma, her slaves cannot eat truma. That's teretz number one. Teretz number two and teretz number three, both of them are going to say that really midiraisa, that her slaves could eat truma, even if she cannot eat truma. And the kasha is a good kasha, and the kasha is true. The kasha is true that the Kohen's wife's slaves could eat truma even if the wife cannot eat truma. It doesn't have to go through her. The acquisition of acquisition can eat truma. But the Gemara is going to say two reasons why midrabanan not. There's a gzer rabbanan. But Rav Amma midiraisa mechalachi. Really midiraisa they could eat truma. Even if wife cannot, her slaves could. Rabbanu the gazri b'hu k'dei shetomar ani eni ocheles. Avada eni nochel. Zoni yetzlo. Hilka chasi lafuka. We want to deter the marriage. Like Chaim David said, this is a bad marriage. Not supposed to be married. So we want to do something. We want to encourage them to get divorced. How do we do that? We make her feel that she doesn't belong. She's married to a Kohen. She can't eat truma because she's a halala. But if her avadim are going to eat truma, she'll still feel like she belongs there. Like, you see, I'm somebody. They recognize me. But if we're going to say that she cannot eat truma and the slaves cannot eat truma, she's going to feel disconnected. That's all we want. We want her to feel disconnected. She's going to say, what am I, a zona? I'm not a wife. I'm not married. Like, what is this? Stop having relations and we're not married. So we want to encourage that feeling. We want to encourage that attitude, and she should say, I want out. And he'll divorce her. It won't be a harmonious marriage. The fact that she doesn't feel like she's part of anything. She didn't get his kahuna. She's married to a Kohen and garnished. He's eating truma, but she cannot eat truma. Her slaves cannot eat truma. So that it'll encourage the divorce. That's what we want, because they're not allowed to be married.
You would have expected her to know that, but every time she has a relationship with that husband,
There's an avera happening
she's
each
doing
time.
avera,
Each time, right? Right, but we have to make also that the
serious-
environment should also
That's
show
not
her
enough.
that. So the environment, right, you're right, that she should know the avera if she's. But now we show her more on the table that she cannot eat truma, and even the slaves cannot eat truma. So she feels disconnected. She knows all the other friends that are married to Kohen and they're all eating truma, and their slaves eating truma, and she cannot eat truma because she became a halal. And even the slaves cannot eat truma. She's not even considered any kind of a connection over here. So that's going to encourage them to separate, which they're supposed to, because they're not allowed to be married. That's the first area.
So this is an exception.
It's a drabanan. It's a drabanan, right? With drabanan. The right says they could eat, with drabanan not. Another
seems very good answer. Where is there? It's not enough.
what?
There's two more chariots.
There's another teretz. The first teretz said the right is not allowed to eat. That was the first teretz. Second teretz was drabanan. Rav Ashi also says drabanan. If you're going to let her avadim to eat truma because of her husband, she might continue to give them to eat truma even after the husband dies. And she thinks that the mother's going to say what she knows she can't eat truma. She knows she's a halal. She's not eating truma, but she might think that she still has the power to give truma even after he dies. And what's that? Are you going to say every Israelis that marries a Kohen should not give her avadim to eat truma because after she's going to think after the husband dies she can continue? Of course not. You don't say such a gzeira. As long as she's married she could eat, and her avadim could eat. And after the husband died, she cannot eat, and her avadim cannot eat. Why should she make such a mistake? Elam Ravashi Balmonas Kohenes. It's talking about that she's a bas Kohen. If this woman who married the Kohen, she wasn't allowed to, but her father also was a Kohen. She was a Kohen. Kohenes means a bas Kohen. She was a Kohen from her birth, and she was allowed to eat truma as long as before she got married. Now she got married to a Kohen, which was us. She married the Kohen Gadol, the mother of the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Hedyot. She shouldn't have married. If we're gonna allow her avadim to eat, she's not allowed to eat. Once she married him, she did an avera. She's a halala. She's not allowed to eat, but her avadim are allowed to eat. If we're going to allow them to eat, she's going to think that even after her husband dies, they're also going to be allowed to eat. She's going to say the following, she's going to pass on herself. She's going to pass on like this. This is going to be her words. I'll try to highlight it just to show what she's going to be saying. She's going to be saying this. This is her longest, and the Gemara is going to say that it's wrong. She's going to say, before I got married, the slaves, or either I or the slaves were allowed to eat truma from my father. She was a bas Kohen. The Benishah means her father's house.
Oh, her father's house.
When I got married to this man, so the avadim were eating in the merit of my husband. That's true. That the husband's a Kohen, her slaves were allowed to eat truma. And now I go back to my original state, and they're allowed to eat again truma, just like they were allowed to eat before I got married. But that's a mistake. And she's wrong. Now the truth is, I would say my own. I don't know if it's to the Gemara that she never. The slaves ate not because of the father, but before she got married, it isn't that the father's house is the one. She's a Kohen. She's a bas Kohen. She's the one who gives the eat truma, not the father. And the husband, when the married husband, the Kohen, it's because the husband. But when she's a bas Kohen, the reason why she's giving her slaves to eat is not because of her father. It's because she's a Koheness. She's a bas Kohen. Them to eat. So she doesn't realize that. She thinks they're eating because of the father. And then she went to get married, then he wasn't her husband. And then she goes back, her husband died, so she goes back and the slaves again could eat, and that's a mistake. Before that, she wasn't a halala. And now she's a halala, she can't eat. The truth is, I don't understand the Lashon HaGemara because she knew she's a halala. She's not eating truma. She knows she's a halala. The question is if her brother could eat truma. So she's going to think that maybe they're allowed to go back to eat truma the way she was before marriage, and they're not allowed to anymore because she's a halala. Her father's not new with the subject. The father doesn't give to eat truma. She's the one who gives to eat truma. Before she was not a halala. Now she is a halala. If you're going to allow them to eat while she's married to a Kohen, she'll continue giving them to eat even after she's not married to him anymore. The Gemara is Akash, if this is true, then the it only explains if she's a bas Kohen. If she's a bas Yisrael, then there's no such chash. The answer is like a low plug. Since there's some widows that are going to make this mistake, so we said all widows should not eat truma. So that's the end of the sugya. We had one kasha with 3 tefillin. The kasha was that even if the woman cannot eat truma because she became a halala, but her avadim should be able to because it's kinyan l'shel kinyan. The whole reason why her avadim can eat is because the acquisition. What's the difference if she could eat truma? The first difference is it doesn't make a difference. That the acquisition only goes through the acquisition. It has to go through each stage. It isn't just that I jump back to to the owner's owner. It has to be that the owner is able to eat truma also, even though the owner's owner could eat truma. So that's the first teretz. Second and third teretz, same with the Rish, they would be able to eat truma with the chash v'avona. The first chash is in order to make the marriage sour, make her feel disconnected, that even the slaves cannot eat truma, and that'll encourage her to get divorced from him. And the third teretz is that she might make a mistake and think that her avodim would be allowed to eat truma even after the husband will die.
So those second and third ones are saying that it does go back to the
right. That really the husband is the one who's giving them to eat, and it's acquisition, even if the acquisition cannot eat truma. But my acquisition is acquisition. But it's executive rabbanan. That's the end of the sugya. The rest of the sugya goes back to the shorish of this whole idea of the mulug and Abdei Tzon Barzel. There are two kinds of properties that a woman could bring into the marriage. We said one is malug, which means that she owns the property, she owns it the whole time, and he just has profits and has to support. You have to feed them and eat, but the principal belongs to her, and Avdei Son Barzel, L'chora belongs to him. But that's what really going to be the sugi now. I just jumped the whole page and said the maskana that's going to be that the husband owns Avdei Son Barzel when it comes in as iron sheep, Son Barzel. So it's really his. And he owes her the money that he evaluated at the beginning of the marriage. When the marriage is over, he has to give her that money regardless. And really, that's going to be the subject. But I said the answer already, but we'll take it slow. Here more starts. So it's nothing to do with the Truma now. We're going not to put Truma. We're bringing the Mishnah again, but the subject we're talking about now is a new subject. Itmar, one line up. The word shum means evaluation, which means shum also means garlic, but that's not the subject over here. Shum means shamai, to evaluate. So that means not malug, you don't evaluate. Malug, nothing. You don't bring the shamai, you don't bring the evaluator. Not what's assessor? What's the word? Assessor. You don't bring in the assessor because what's the difference? Whatever happens, happens. If it gets more expensive or cheaper, she gets back her property as is. But by Nixay Son Barzal, you have to bring in an assessor to see how much it's worth because that's what he's going to be five at the end. The other case was she bought in something. Sure, whatever it might be, it might have been a field, it might have been property, whatever it was. And then at the end of the marriage, here's a divorce, let's say. So she wants it back. She brought in, what's an example? A field or something portable. She brought in, any example? Something a wife would bring into the marriage.
Beautiful vase.
Beautiful vase. And she wants it back. So he says, we made up, it cost $1,000. I'll give you $1,000, but I want this vase. Who has the right to get the object? Is it just that he pays money for it? But
Why should she get the money? Why should she get that? They sell it. That's what it is.
That's the question.
It stays. It's supposed to stay.
That's the question. That when a woman brings in, let's say, Son Brazil, is it his or is it hers? I introduced the whole sugya. I introduced that it's his. I said I made it simple. Let's say Malug is hers and he has the right to use it. Let's say Son Brazil is his. But really, that Gemara is opening up the subject now, and that's the way the Gemara presents it.
Meaning, does he have a right to sell it?
Does he have a right to keep it? Here, case is keeping it. You want to know a case? The more to know your case also is about to sell it. It's the same question. Here, the Gemara is talking about that by the divorce. She wants it back, and he wants to pay the value and keep it. That's the way the Gemara presents the question. That the person, a woman, brought in something to be evaluated. We'll call it son barza. The word shum is like son barza, the iron sheep. And at the end of the marriage, the Americans came down, tell us. She says, I want it back. I want this kli, very nice kli, K-like. This vase, I want it back. And who am I? Damamani knows, and he says, I'll pay you for it. I'll give you the value. We made up how much it's worth, and I want to keep it. It's mine. Adin and me, who's right? Now, it's me machlokas. David Amar, Adin, Ima. She wins. She has a right to get back the vase. Rabbi Ami Amar, Adin Imo, he wins. And Mark explains. Because the prestige of her father's house. That means that I'll just say a pshat that really it seems to be true, but maybe the mother doesn't know it yet. That really it's his. Really it's his, but made a takana that she should be able to buy it back, to get it back, in order that the father's house should stay intact. Means that when somebody had a field, an estate, or an heirloom, whatever it might be, something that was considered the father's home, we don't want them to lose it. They should have the prestige that they're allowed to, they can still have their property back. Let's talk about a field. The field maybe makes more sense to people that this is their house. And even though she brought it into the husband, as long as the marriage was going, but if the marriage is over, we wanted to be able to go back to the original owners. So therefore, even though it might have been technically that he bought it, but if it's still around, or maybe we're going to say that he's supposed to keep it around in order that eventually it can go back to her. Shvach Besavia means the prestige of her father's home. So she has a right to buy it back. She has a right to get it back. No, it belongs to him. This is all the Mishnah, quotes from our Mishnah. It says the Mishnah that if the property dies, it's his loss. If it gets worth more, it's his gain. And therefore also they can eat truma. Since he has the responsibility, it means it's his gain or loss if it goes up or down. So that's why he could give truma, that he gives the slaves, even though she cannot eat truma. If he could eat truma, so those slaves of Avdei Tzon Barzal could eat truma, that shows that it's his. And he doesn't know the shvach beisav. He doesn't know that issue that because the prestige he should get it back. It belongs to him. So he brought it right from our Mishnah. This was our Mishnah. These words were our Mishnah. just to highlight it, this was our Mishnah. All these words are our Mishnah. And the Mishnah says, based on this Mishnah, I see that it says, if it says that if the price goes up, price goes down, it's all his gain or loss, and therefore his slaves eat truma, even though she cannot eat truma, but it's considered his slaves. So that means that it's his. So now, after the marriage is over, he wants to keep it. He has the right to keep it and pay money. It doesn't say the word Ein Shelo. The Mishnah doesn't say that since if the price goes up or goes down, so it's his. It doesn't say Hol Ein Shelo Yochelu. It says Hol B'chai B'ach Yusan. So it seems they're saying that the criteria for eating truma is not if you own it or not. That even if you don't own that, but the fact that you have responsibility, the word here, that I guess if there's a better word in English, but it means that the gain is mine, the loss is mine. That means that it's I have that price for it. That's the kobeya for truma, and doesn't necessarily mean that I own it. So Rav Safra is challenging Rav Ami. Rabbi brought a right from our Mishnah that it belongs to him because his slaves eat these slaves eat truma. It must be that it's his. Rav Safra no. Does it say that it belongs to him? It says that he's chayiv in the price of the gain and the loss. Maybe it's not his. To eat truma, the fact that the bottom eat truma is not a right that it's his. It could just be that it's chayiv price is enough reason that they could eat truma. Not about goes into the subject. Is that true? Is it enough? Is it true that if you're chayiv in price for something, that you have the gain or loss of something? Is that enough reason that I could eat truma, or you have to actually own it? That's going to be a subject for a couple of lines. Is that so that if you're chayiv in price of something, that gives the right to eat truma? But no, Mishnah. Here goes the Mishnah. We said before, like Jacob mentioned that a Kohen's animals also could eat truma, and Yisrael's animals cannot eat truma. Yisrael should sachar param and Kohen. What's it then if a Yisrael rents a cow from a Kohen? It's a Kohen's cow. The Kohen's cow is not eat truma, but now it's temporarily rented to a Yisrael. Could he eat truma now during the time of the rental? Yes, it could eat. Kashin is a kind of a food, a vetch is called kind of a bean, animal food. Yes, why? Because it belongs to the Kohen. Kohen shesachar param Yisrael. How about the opposite? That the Kohen rented a cow from a Yisrael, and renter, the Kohen has the obligation to feed it. Could he eat truma?
No.
So the Gemara is saying that you're wrong, Rav Safra, that achrayus is not enough to be able to eat truma. Here the Kohen has achrayus.
Ownership.
Has to do with the ownership. So Rav Safra, you're wrong. That if it says in our Mishnah that the Kohen could give the slaves to eat truma, it's because it's his. The fact that it's chayv achrayus is not enough. But the Gemara rejects this proof. But his bro, ni nami the mechayv b'gneva v'abeda, this is not called achrayus. All these chayiv is to feed. That's true. The Kohen rented the cow has to feed it, but he doesn't have achrayus. He also has achrayus if it gets stolen. A socher, somebody rents. He's chayiv if it gets stolen or lost. The loss or theft, the renter is chayiv. But the other things, if it happened in owners, or if it got devalued or something like that, if it got weaker, does the socher have to pay for that? No. So that's not called achrayus. I'm going to say really that achrayus is enough to give truma, and the case you brought me is not a case of achrayus. A good case of achrayus. Although the Sefer, our case will be more similar to the next case. Yisrael shesham param mikohen. Not that he rented it, but Yisrael evaluated. What does it mean? That Yisrael takes a cow from a Kohen and evaluates how much it's worth, and he's responsible to give back the same value. Because the Yisrael he evaluated, assessed how much this cow is worth, the Kohen's cow, and he accepted upon himself, I'm going to give it back to you the same value. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to work it, but I'm going to give you back the same value that you gave it to me now. And if it gets devalued or inflated, how do you say the word? Devalued or upvalued, whatever the word's going to be. So it stays the same. I'm going to pay you the amount that it's worth now. Right now it's worth $5,000. I'm going to give you $5,000 back. So over there, what's the din? Yisrael shesham param mikohen lo yechil lana kashin etruma. Even though it belongs to the Kohen, if now the Yisrael took full achrayus, not only for gneva v'aved, not that he rented it, but he said, I'm going to pay the $5,000 for better or for worse. So then the halacha is that he's not allowed to eat truma, even though the owner is the Kohen. But since the Yisrael took on full responsibility. So then the Yisrael's now, and the opposite, Kohen shesham param Yisrael yechil lana kashin etruma. If the Kohen is the one who took on full responsibility of the assessment, so then it could eat truma, even though the owner is going to be the the Yisrael. Since the Kohen has full responsibility, he could get a truma. So Rav Safra succeeded in rejecting the proof of Rabami. Rabami wanted to bring the right from our Mishnah that the fact that the Kohen could give deeps to eat truma, even though his wife cannot eat truma, is a proof that he owns it. He said not a proof. It just shows that he has full responsibility. Full responsibility is enough to give truma, but it's not a right that he owns it. So there's no right to Rabami yet. Rabami is saying that by Nisim Elul you own it, but it's not a proof from our Mishnah. Not a wants to know who the Paskin like. We have machlokes now. Who owns Nichsei Tzon Barzel? Is it the husband or the wife? And the case was that she wants it after the marriage is over. She wants it back, and he wants it. He wants it. So that's the machlokes. Yosef Rabba, Rav Yosef Beshili Pirkei Rav Nachman. Rabba and Rav Yosef was sitting at the end of the shir of Rav Nachman. I mean, after the shir was over, they were still continuing to learn. They found brises for each one. This question has more ramifications, and the Gemara brought a brisa for each one. Rabami says it belongs to him. The Nechsei Tzon Barzel belonged to the husband. What's the raya? It says in the brisa like this: You know, the halach is that Eved Knani, that if the master knocks out an eye or a tooth, no, if it was a mistake on purpose, whatever it was, the slave goes free. That's the pasuk in the Torah that that if the master knocks out an eye or a tooth, the slave goes free. What will be the din by this kind of a slave? Avdei Tzon Barzel. You have a sheep, not a sheep, you have an Eved, that's an iron sheep. That means that the husband, she brought it into the marriage and the husband took on full responsibility. What's the din if the husband knocked out the tooth? What's the din if the wife knocked out the tooth? Let's say it's by mistake, make it a nice kosher case, by mistake, they bumped into them, whatever it might be, they did it by mistake. Who's the owner of the slave? Only if the owner knocks out the eye or tooth does he go free. If a stranger doesn't go free. So here the case is Avdei Tzon Barzel, the woman brought in Avadim into the marriage, and what's the halacha? If the husband knocked out the tooth, does he go free? If the wife knocked out the tooth, does he go free? So here it says, Yotzin b'shem vayin shel ish, avalo l'isha. The husband is considered the owner, that if he knocked out the eye or tooth, the slave goes free, but not the woman. If the woman would have done it not, what does it say openly? That he's the owner. So it's a right to Rabbi. Rabbi says that the husband is the owner. But Tani Kavas Rabbi Yehuda, we also have a brisa the other way that says that she's the owner. What does it say in the brisa? This is what the Rav said. That another ramification would be he wants to sell it. Not that they're divorced, and not that he wants to sell it. The wife brought in this estate into the marriage, and he evaluated how much it's worth, whatever, $100,000, and now he wants to sell it. And he'll say, if ever it happens, I have to pay you. If I die, or if I divorce, so I'll give you the $100. Here it says he's not allowed to sell. Why is he not allowed to sell? According to Rami, he should be allowed to sell. So that's a right to Rav Yehuda that it belongs to her. And just like at the end, she has a right to get it back, he also has no right to sell it, the whole marriage. The Bryce has another couple of lines that I don't understand so well, but I'll read it. But the Raya al is over already. The Raya is enough. In the first line, it says that he cannot sell it. That means that it belongs to her. So the Mepharshim seem to say the case would be that he gave her a present. A husband gave his wife a present. When he gives her a present, also belongs to her. How does it belong to her now? She didn't bring it into marriage. He gave her a present. And he gave her a present, and he said there's going to be the status of Nechsei Tzon Barzel. So it says also he's not allowed to sell it. He gave her a present, and then he wants to sell it, and he's obligated to give the amount of money. If he ever divorces her or he dies, she'll get back the money. But it says no, he's not allowed to sell it. Why? Because Nechsei Tzon Barzel, you're not allowed to sell because it becomes the wife's. So this is a right to Rav Yehuda. I don't get these two lines. I don't know what it means. It's Rashi seems to say either one of them sold it. The way Rashi explains it, if either one of them sold it, then either one of them has a right to get it back from the buyers. I'd rather not say a pshat because I don't really understand. But as far as the raya is from the first line, that it says the Nechsei Tzon Barzel, the husband's not allowed to sell it. So as a raya too, Rav Yehuda that says that the husband's not allowed to sell it, in order that it should go back to the husband's, to the wife's family. The Gemara continues passing like Rav Nachman, Rav Yehuda, that not allowed to sell it, and if she wants it back, she gets it back.
Didn't we imply that could be a gezerah? You want to keep it in the family?
Yeah, it could be. That's the reason. It's good. But that makes that
That makes it some barzels.
Makes town Brazil means that it's considered hers as far as these halachas go. But you're right. The Gemara is going to say soon that really what I said is the maskana. Even Aviuda also holds that really it's his, but we made a takana that he should not sell it, and eventually she gets it back. But really, he also agrees that essentially it's his. Means the Shem Brian, Lachara comes out, it's not a Ryan anymore, because the Shem Brian would be true that even the contract of Aviuda belongs to him, and he's the real owner. But there's a takana to give it back to her if the marriage is over, or not to sell it.
Okay.
Why are you passing like Aviuda? We have a price like Abami. The Gemara should answer because there's also a price like Aviuda also. I'm not sure. But the Gemara says, even though it's a price like that, but his reason makes a lot of sense that we want to have the prestige to give it back to the father's house, and therefore he's not allowed to sell it, and he has to give it back to her if she wants it back.
What does it mean, Sheva?
Shevach Pesavia means the honor, the prestige.
The honor, okay.
That was on top of the page also, all the way top of the page.
I would say also Sheva.
That
Yeah,
was like,
Sheva Pesavia. Okay, I see.
Mars says a story. It's the Ayla Leila Gavra. It's the Ladin al Subik Subasa. There's a woman who came into the marriage with a very expensive garment. Itztala is like what is a talis, and Milsa Melas is a very expensive wool. A very expensive garment she brought into the marriage as Nichse Son Baza, this iron sheep case. Shachiv, and the husband died. Shaklu Yasmi Prasu Amisna. The Yosomim, the orphans, they took it and they spread it out over their dead father. It means they wanted to use it as part of the funeral that it should be for the mace. It becomes Asa Bana, if it belongs to them, and you put something onto the mace, the same way the mace is Asa Bana, everything you dedicated to the mace also becomes Asa Bana. So the question is, who does it belong to? If did it belong to them or did it belong to the wife? If it belonged to them, so then they have the right to do that, and it becomes Asabana, it becomes dedicated to the mace. If it belongs to her, they have the right to do that. The mace acquires it. It means that it becomes dedicated to the mace, and it becomes also to use, means it belongs to them. The kasha is Amalei Nanai. You ever heard of this name? Nanai. Nanai, grade Rav Yosef, grade Rava. Rava had a son, Rav Yosef, who had a son, Nanai. And he said, Rav Kana, my grandfather, Rava, I think it's his grandfather, passed like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda means that it belongs to the wife. So how do the orphans of the husband have a right to make it asabana? It belongs to the wife. Doesn't Rabbi Yehuda agree that it's lacking collection? Here's where the Gemara is mashma that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it really belongs to him. It really belongs to him, but there's a takana to sell it back, to give it back to the wife, and till they collect it, it's really only Meshuvah, there's only a lien on it. This is where the Gemara gives away the story that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it really belongs to him. It's only a takana to sell it, to give it back, or to shouldn't sell it, to keep it in the family, but not that it really belongs to her, it really belongs to him. And since it's not been collected yet, it still belongs to him. Next page. But if it's only a lien, so there are things that override the lien. So chametz would be a case. What's the case? Hektish is the first case. There was a lien on something, and the owner consecrated it. So the lien goes off. He still owes the money, of course, but the lien goes off. Also, chametz, if something was a lien on chametz, and the chametz became also on Pesach, so the chametz overrides the lien. And shichur, if there was an eved that was there was a lien on the eved for a loan, and the owner freed the slave, so it takes off the shibud. The lien is off. Of course, the person last owns the money, owes the money, but the shibud goes off. So here too, there was a shibud. The wife had a right to collect it, not that it was hers. This is what the Gemara is saying, that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that we wanted to keep it to be in the wife's family, but still, it really belongs to him. It's just like a that she has a lien on it, she's allowed to get it back. But if they were makdashit, this wasn't consecrated, they dedicated it to the mace, which is the same halacha, also it takes off the lien. And therefore, they have to give money. They have to give money, but they lost the item because it really belongs to him. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. This is interesting halacha now. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. She brought into the marriage two vases, worth $1,000. And then they increased the value, and now they're worth $2,000. Each one is worth $1,000 now. How much does she have a right to get back for the ksuba? Only $1,000. Does she have a right to get the kli back? So she has a right to get only one, because the whole ksuba is only now $1,000. He owes $1,000, and one of the kelim is worth $1,000. So he'll say, even according to Rav Yehuda, even Rav Yehuda that says that she has a right to get the original thing, but only one of them because they're not a right to more. So he says no talto b'ksubas. She's allowed to take both of them. Echad no talto. I'm sorry. Echad talto b'ksubas.
No talto.
One of them she takes because the ksuba that he owes her $1,000. Now, as we said, he can't give money. He has to give the actual kli. And we even allow her to pay for the second one. She doesn't have a right for the ksuba. She only has $1,000. She has the right to buy it. That's a huge chiddush. First of all, I said what's the chiddush? We said already. That she has the right to buy it back. Rav Yehuda said that she has the right. She has the right to get it. No, there's a big chiddush over here. Only if that's how much her ksuba is. So then, whatever the amount of ksuba, she has a right to get the same object. But to give money and to take it more than she's getting, you might think no. Even that she has a right to that also. So with the raisa or with the raisa, the son barzel belongs to him, but we pass like Rav Yehuda that she has a right to keep it in the family, so he's not allowed to sell it. And if the marriage is over, she has a right to get that object back also. And even more, she has a right even to buy it back if it's more than the rights of her ksuba.
Wow.
Okay, everybody. Thank you. Sorry for going overtime. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you.